Just received a chat from Myron. Can everyone hear now? We're going to go ahead and start the conference. I'm getting some reports here of folks unable to hear audio. We do have someone on support here, so we're going to just resolve that for everyone. All right, looks like we got that all resolved. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today on the SBA Franchise SOP changes in the franchise registry. Some of you may remember me from work with the registry you've done in the past. I recognize some of the names I'm seeing in our participants window, so that's really fantastic. We really appreciate the positive feedback from all of you lenders that we've gotten on our sessions that we've given so far. We consider ourselves subject matter experts on franchising, so it's our business to know everything related to the franchise business model and be here to assist you. Franchise business lending is a unique form of small business financing, so we're going to continue to be a resource for you here and one that you can count on at the franchise registry going forward. To that end, of course, we welcome your questions and comments throughout the presentation. Please type your questions in the chat box there on the left when they come to mind. It should be on the bottom left-hand side of your screen. We're going to try to address all the questions that we can on the webinar. So if we run over a little bit of time, we may go a little extra. Feel free to drop off if you like. We're going to be aggregating all of those great questions and sending them out to everyone who's attending at the end of the call. As well as the recording that we have, we're going to be sending a link out to everyone who's registered. So don't feel like if you're missing something that you're going to miss it out. We're going to be able to follow up with you so you have all that information whenever you need it. And for those of you who may have attended the webinar in the past, I promise you we have some new content here today. There's been some changes to the process even in the last few weeks. So there's going to be some new information. Some of it's going to be a repeat, but we have 5 new slides that have some really great new info, and it's going to be towards the front. So hopefully you'll stay on for that. Let's go ahead and get started. So the question we're answering here today is, now does the new SOP process simplify your lending business or complicate it? The answer is it's going to do a little bit of both. Today we're going to cover how the franchise registry changes in the SOP simplified some things, but how it also created some uncertainty and where it shifted the risk from the SBA onto you, the lender. Also going to show you how the franchise registry is going to make the process as simple as possible and how the registry is going to mitigate some of these new risks that have been shifted onto you. Over the next hour, we're going to address what changed in the December 2016 SOP update. We're going to look at some of the more recent changes that have been announced by some procedural notices that have come out. We're going to look at lender reaction to the changes based on all of the 3,000 lenders we have on our registry and those that have attended our webinars. And we're going to delve in a little bit more deeply into the website and look at the franchise registry solutions to these issues that we're all facing. I'm going to start off with a little lender poll to see and just take a sense of everyone in the audience. How are you feeling about these new SOP changes? You should see a poll result input box on the screen. I'm going to vote positive just because I'm having a fantastic day and I'm feeling really great today, so I'm going to vote positive. Now you should be seeing the results come up on the screen. I was counted in the positive. You can see from the audience we have, good over about 50% of you are in the uncertain category, and almost 75%, 60 or so now as the results are coming in, 65, are either negative or uncertain about these new changes. And that's part of the reason why we're doing these webinars, to make sure that we have all that information out there and clearing up the process. And we're going to see some of the information that we're displaying to you as lenders on the site. 50% uncertain, that's a lot uncertain. Our next question is, how do you anticipate that these changes will affect your external costs to finance franchises? I think you're putting in a little bit more work. You're going to be doing a lot more work on these brands, maybe a little bit more uncertainty. I'm going to vote increase. I think it's going to cause some issues. So let's hit submit on increase. Okay, just had a question about a call-in number. May is our support person here. She's just put out the call number. If anyone's having issues with audio, just go ahead in the chat box to the left, and you'll see a dial-in number and an access code if the conference audio isn't working for you. Taking a look at the poll, we'll see most of the answers here are increase. Decrease makes sense if you're thinking, hey, it's this faster process. There's a streamlined addendum. Most franchisors are going to sign it and not have a problem. So I can see where a decrease or stay the same would come in. Based on our webinars with over 3,000 lenders, we've seen, and you can see from the polls that we did here, that about 76% or so on average are uncertain or negative about the SOP changes and how these changes will affect the number of franchise loans that they'll be able to make. Of course, change always creates uncertainty, but these changes created more uncertainty than perhaps the SBA intended. Why is that? We're going to look back in time and see how the SOP has evolved and try to find out exactly why that is. Here's a wonderful timeline of the SBA SOP, kind of where it's been and where it's going. Now, for those of you that remember the SBA franchise review process prior to the financial crisis, the SBA only looked at a handful of issues in agreements that were focused on what the SBA called franchise affiliation. Now, these are issues that are present in the franchise agreement that the SBA determined that they prevented the franchisees their right to profit or sustain a loss commensurate with their own efforts. This is language from the SBA SOP. Now, at the time, most addendums focused on the transfer issue almost exclusively, whether or not the franchisor is going to unreasonably withhold their consent to transfer the business in the case that the borrower wants to sell or something else happens. Then came the financial crisis in 2008-2009 when the SBA experienced unprecedented losses in their portfolio. So they had to take a look and say, what's going on here? SBA reviewed all of the defaulted loans, and they noticed a significant number of issues that lenders missed in their loan evaluations with respect to this affiliation question. And it was at that time that the SBA started to expand their review. They said, hey, we've got to expand what we're looking at. We've got to expand this. More rules came into effect into the franchise affiliation review process. The SBA started reviewing other documents for SBA requirements, and they started consistently making decisions on business eligibility as well. Some of you may be familiar with, and the most famous of these was, the Sola Salons and Salons by JC brands, which were subsequently taken off the franchise registry in August of 2009 because the SBA determined that these businesses were passive businesses and therefore not eligible for SBA financing. Then, in 2010, the SBA determined that they were eligible businesses, so they were back on the franchise registry, and then again determined that they were ineligible in 2014. There was a lot of back and forth going on with the salons business. In 2010, another example of this, in 2010, master franchise agreements were also determined to be ineligible for SBA financing because of business eligibility issues. They considered them speculative businesses similar to real estate development. And in 2011, SBA expanded their reviews to include other documents in the franchise disclosure document. So not just the franchise agreement, but if there were any other supporting documents, collateral assignments of lease or telephone numbers, all these other different documents the SBA had expanded in 2011 to include all of those as well. That's how we were operating for the last several years. And now let's flash forward to January of 2017. The SBA released a one-size-fits-all addendum, but was now no longer reviewing business eligibility and other documents. They've now shifted that responsibility to the lender. Then again now in February 2017, the most recent procedural notice that was put out by the SBA issued their notice amending the SOP that was put out in January, which issued the standard addendum, and allowed franchisors the option to use their previously approved addendum from 2015 or 2016 if they had an issue with or didn't want to sign that one-size-fits-all addendum. So because the SOP is simplifying the affiliation process only, in many ways this SOP is referring itself back and reverting back to its pre-recession days in terms of how it operates and what it covers in terms of eligibility. I thought the easiest way to illustrate the differences between the SBA's new operating procedure and the old one was to have a side-by-side comparison. Over the last 7 years, the SBA has put out an SOP nearly every year, but the most recent one, there was about an 18-month gap between, I think it was 5010.5H and the new one, which is 5010.5I. In 2016, the SBA provided you, the lender, with determinations on everything related to the unique challenges of financing a franchise. So determinations on whether a brand's business was a franchise according to the SBA's definition, determinations on business eligibility was done for you, a customized franchise affiliation addendum if required, and that's what you got from the franchise registry, done by franchise system, and a certification was available, as well as negotiating streamlined solutions for other documents. So if there was something like an eligibility note in the brand or some other issue, there were negotiated solutions that were specific to each brand that were able to meet SBA requirements. But in 2017, the SBA has now provided us with a one-size-fits-all affiliation addendum, which means that on the one hand, you won't have to wait for SBA to provide the determination, which could be considered a good thing. But the bad part is that it's a sign it or don't get financing ultimatum, meaning the brand's either going to take this addendum and use this process or not, versus a negotiation with franchisors, which is the process that's been in the past, where the SBA is able to consult with the franchisor and they're able to craft language that meets their franchise system requirements. If a franchisor negotiated language with the SBA to make their contracts overcome the affiliation rules and they incorporate that language into their franchise agreement, the franchisor is losing out in this situation because the SBA is wanting an addendum in every loan file. Right? So there are a lot of brands out there that did their affiliation reviews, found issues in their agreement, and they've worked to modify their franchise agreements. Well, now they're still being made to sign the standard addendum even though they've amended that process and they've changed their franchise agreement to fall in line with what SBA was requiring. Unfortunately, the franchisors that incorporate this language for the benefit of all franchisees, they're just not able to sign the certification document. They're going to have to sign the standard addendum. So again, back to the same issue they had before. In accordance with 13 CFR 120.150, applicants must be creditworthy and loans must reasonably assure repayment considering past earnings, projected cash flow, future prospects, and the effects of any affiliates. The SOP further requires lenders to test the feasibility of projections against industry averages and historical information with an explanation for significant deviation. This is on page 150 of the SBA SOP. An example of some issues in the past was an OIG report on Banco Popular's loans to Huntington Learning Center. And that report found that lenders disregarded relevant and available data, which indicated that franchisees' revenue projections were unreasonable. And this was due, at least in part, to the lender's perception that franchise loans required a lesser degree of due diligence just because of the established business model of franchise systems. They were thinking, oh, it's a franchise. It's going to run. It's going to be great. We don't have to look at all this other information. But in fact, the OIG report found that these loans to Huntington Learning Center were an issue because they ignored the relevant available information. Further in the SOP, on page 151, it indicates a need for discussion of other relevant information. For example, if the application involves a franchise, the lender must review the franchise agreement. This is out of the SOP. Lender must review the franchise agreement and all relating documents, including the franchise disclosure document, and any credit information provided, such as the number of failed franchisees and cash flow projections provided by the franchisor. Therefore, as a prudent lender, you need to review the franchise disclosure document and have it in your loan file, as well as reviewing all the other relevant and available data. A lot of this is on the franchise registry in the form of the bank credit report, which is a free tool for lenders provided by franchisors, the fund report, which is a for-pay tool for lenders that's created by us at FRAN Data, and the other SBA data and all that great information that's out there. So the question we want to put to you on this call in terms of underwriting is that how would the OIG or the SBA view your failed loans for a franchise if they later found out that it had a 385 franchise credit system credit score, also known as a fund score, that indicated that over the last 7 years there's only been a success rate of 73% of the brand? They're going to look at you and wonder why you didn't address these issues in your credit write-up. The SBA has also recommended special provisions for franchises that are on page 179 of the SOP 5010-5I. These are recommended language pieces that the SBA has given to lenders to look at in the case of a franchise loan. Now, many franchisors are not going to agree to these special provisions. Some of them will, but because they're recommended and not required, you're not going to have every franchisor that's willing to do that. Now, franchisors are updating their franchise registry count, and we're going out and calling out the brands as well to get this information to indicate if they will agree to the special provisions for franchises, and within that, which of these provisions they will agree to. So we're talking about the ability of the lender to go in and have access to franchisor's books and records, the ability to cure default in the event of an issue with your borrower. These are the special provisions. So for the first time, we're going to have them on the franchise registry, so you're going to know where the brand stands even before you get into the weeds on the deal. So you won't have to have an addendum or something for the special provisions that you're handing to a borrower or a franchisor, and they're saying, oh, we're never going to sign this, and you have issues in your process. So that's another important thing that we're going to be listing for you on the SBA section on the registry. All right, let's take a look at the new SBA policy notice. This came out in February on the 14th. I wanted to touch on a couple of these items. This is the policy notice that allows the franchisor to choose whether or not they want to use the standard addendum, which is Form 2462, or that previously approved addendum from 2015 or 2016 that we talked about, which would accompany a certification as well, which is actually Form 2463. So we're going to look at both of those here in a minute. What they did in this new procedural notice on the 14th, the SBA has updated the addendum form to allow businesses to identify the name of the parties in the agreement to include other non-franchise agreements like licensed dealer, jobber, membership agreements, all different types of agreements. So the form now has a drop-down menu, so that's super easy to do. And we also have that form hosted for you on the franchise registry, so that's going to be really easy to access, and we'll show you how to get that. SBA also clarified that at the time financing is sought, if there are any recorded restrictive covenants against the real estate, that they must be removed. And they clarified that for temporary personnel franchises, this is kind of a niche one, but that the franchise must employ those temporary employees. So if you're a temporary personnel franchise, the franchise itself must employ the temporary employees. And this is noteworthy because this is actually contrary to how the business model operates. So like a lot of this that we're going through, we're going to wait and see how franchisors adjust to that, and we'll be keeping an eye on and reporting back to you on any changes. I thought it would be interesting to take a look at what franchisors are saying. We got your feedback, and we showed you what lenders were feeling about the changes. Not surprising that the franchisors are also uncertain, pretty much equally as uncertain about the SOP changes that lenders are. And they're telling us that they want to help lenders through this change because they don't want to slow down the financing process. And this is what this is all about. It's a community of interest with us on FRAN data and the franchise registry. And this process helps to make more loans and better loans for franchisees and the industry in general. But of course you realize that many franchisors still haven't even reviewed the SOP changes. I told you before that we're calling out the franchise brands to determine whether or not they're going to sign the new addendum, or do they want to use a previously approved document. And we found that some of them do have their ducks in a row, but some of them hadn't even heard of the changes, need to take a little bit of time to consider it. Well, you can see basically most of them, 70%, are negative or uncertain about the new changes to the SOP process. Now let's take a look at the little bit more depth of the initial franchise community reaction. Since the SOP was released in December, we've been gathering extensive feedback from franchisors, and that's been really integral and helpful for us. Those with issues, and some of them have issues, and I'm sure you've ran into some with franchise brands. We've been categorizing them and referring them to the IFA for future conversation with the SBA and to elevate them to a level in the industry. The reaction generally falls into three categories: concerns, positive feedback, and unresolved questions. Franchisors have expressed concern about the addendum. The concerns are varied, though, based upon the franchise system. First, even though the SBA rules have prevented franchise systems from being eligible for SBA financing if they hire and fire employees, there has never been a customized addendum that we've seen that includes language that directly states that the franchisor does not control their franchisees' employees, like it says in the standard addendum. Many franchisors have expressed outrage to us that that addendum has an embedded a presumptive link of joint employment in that addendum. For these brands, the franchise agreement, or those that have joint employment issues, for those brands, their franchise agreement explicitly states that the franchisee is an independent contractor, and for them that has been sufficient. Additionally, the one-size-fits-all addendum that we see, Form 2462, does not provide franchisors with the ability to clarify the franchise agreement intent or provide them with any flexibility to explain more details around the process by which their provisions and SBA provisions are going to be executed in their system. Of course, we've had franchisors explain that they don't care about the addendum, but what they care about is the time and the money that they've spent creating these solutions that have streamlined the issues that arise in their documents with each lender. So they've spent time negotiating with the SBA, crafting these addendums, and they're upset that this is all being thrown away for a standard addendum that's not going to necessarily fit their system as closely as they'd like them to. Franchisors as well that have previously received financing because SBA customized an addendum so that the franchisees would not be calculated in a size assessment of the franchisor will also no longer be able to obtain SBA financing. And there are franchisors who aren't sure whether they will now be caught up in a business model dispute or issue because individual lenders will be deciding some of these issues on their own now instead of the SBA taking a stance on business model eligibility. Of course, we've had positive feedback from franchise brands. The addendum has significantly reduced the number of rules that a franchise is subjected to relative to franchise affiliation. And a lot of brands have said that they're happy that there isn't any more review time for franchise affiliation, that they just sign a standard addendum and they pass it through. And finally, we have unresolved questions. Since the SBA has adopted its definition of a franchise based on the FTC rule, the Federal Trade Commission rule, does this now mean that the 7 FTC rule exemptions apply? The SBA has talked specifically about one exemption to gas stations, which is included, but they haven't referenced the other 6 exemptions. So based on the addendum, it appears as though previously ineligible brands such as 7-Eleven would now be eligible. We question, was that the SBA's intent? And finally, franchisors are wondering if this rule will be substantially modified or eliminated, like the overtime rule, which was temporarily blocked by a federal judge. So some of them are saying, well, what's going on? Are we going to have a repeal of this? Are we going to modify it? So they're kind of taking a wait-and-see approach. Now, big question that I've gotten in lender support, because I deal with a lot of you folks out there, and I love all of you, by the way. But the big question I get is, what's going on with the registry? Is the franchise registry operated by FRAN Data going to be going away? Of course not. We're super appreciative of the concerns that you guys have expressed. We know you have uncertainty and risk, and we're here to help you mitigate those. The franchise registry has always helped you mitigate those risks and is going to continue to do so. Now, I know the way the SOP update was written, it's really confusing because it sounds like the franchise registry is going away. But the SBA has never hosted the franchise registry site. They never will. It's always been in control of FRAN Data. They've never hosted the site. And it is not going to be ever taken offline or go away. Franchisors sign up for the franchise registry to make lending easier for their franchises. That's why we're here. And you as a lender have always had the choice to go off and do things on your own. You've always had the choice to review documents and go through the process by yourself. But you've chosen to rely on the franchise registry because we've been there, because we have the experience, and because we've mitigated these risks in the past. So if there's one thing that I want to leave everyone with today, it's that everything, and we do mean everything, that you've had access to on the franchise registry, you will continue to have access to, and there's going to be some more. We're going to talk about some of the new enhancements and the changes that we're going through in the forthcoming slides. All right, let's take a look at the SBA section. So this view should look familiar to most of you on the call. This is the SBA section on the franchise registry. Moreover, the SBA section is circled. We're on the general tab of a brand search that you may have done on the registry. So this is the home page of the franchisor's account. We show the NAICS code. We have the FRUNS number, contact information that's provided by the franchisor, which tells you who you should be contacting for each of the specific purposes. This is really important stuff and actually makes your job a lot easier. So you're not having to go through the borrower and say, who do I contact for this? Who do I contact for that? It gives you everything you need right at your fingertips. The SBA contact that you'll see here, just to go through what these are, the SBA contact is the person that you're going to send SBA documentation to. So if they're signing a standard addendum or their previously approved addendum, that's the contact person at the brand for document signature. So you don't want to give these documents to your borrower and say, oh, get these signed by the brand. A lot of times the borrower is dealing with a development person or someone in the field that may not be intimately aware of their SBA process, even within their own system. The contact person that the brand is giving us is the person that they want to handle these, that they want to handle the contracts. They're going to get you the documents signed and back to you. They'll answer any SBA credit questions there if you need. That's the franchise financing contact. So the franchise finance contact is someone that you'll reach out to for any underwriting issues that you might have. If you're looking in the franchise disclosure document and you have a question about open and closed units, or maybe the item 19 has some expense information that worries you a little bit, franchise financing contact is going to be the person that you want to reach out to at the brand for questions on those. And the franchise sales contact is the person that you want to reach out to establish a referral relationship. So, maybe you've done a bunch of loans to Tropical Smoothie in this case, and you want to do some more. Want to talk to them about a remodeling program or a transfer financing program. That franchise sales contact is going to be the person that you want to reach out to for that info. Again, don't send the SBA documentation to the franchisee. You don't want to do that. That's just going to cause you trouble, and you're going to get into people that aren't aware of the process. So you want to avoid that. Just use the contacts that we have on the registry for you. We're going to dig in now to the SBA folder. This is again with the General tab. We're going to dig into the SBA folder to see how the franchise registry is going to simplify things for you in SBA, and as well as some of the changes from last year. So if you're a power user on the registry, you'll notice that there are some differences, and we'll kind of talk through what those look like. So first off, the first uncertainty risk that you need to address is the question, is the business a franchise according to the FTC definition? Remember now, the new SOP is saying we're going to apply these affiliation rules in the new addendum if the brand meets the FTC's definition of a franchise. So do you know how you're going to determine that? Are you going to determine it on your own? Are you going to just kind of wait and see what's going on? Franchise registry is the best place to do it. I'll tell you that companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, in some cases just avoiding being an FTC franchise. The great news is that our database has always categorized branded businesses as FTC businesses or not. Starting January 1, we're going to show you which brands, and of course it's March 14th, so it's already in. We're going to show you which brands are FTC brands, and those that aren't, we're going to tell you why on the franchise registry. So we have that information there. It's kind of been in the background. We've always been collecting it as part of what we do, and now we're going to put that out there for you as lender. So really great value add for the registry that's in place now. The second uncertainty you're going to face is, will the franchise brand agree to sign the standard addendum, or do they want to sign their previously approved addendum? What process do they want to go through, right? Because now the brand has an option. They can sign Form 2462, which is the standard addendum, or they can use one of their previously approved documents, or they can just take their ball and go home and say, I don't like this and I'm not doing SBA lending anymore. Well, the good news is that we're going to go out, and we have been doing, going out to brands and determining what their stance is. Do they want to sign the standard addendum? Do they prefer a previously approved addendum? Or are they not signing this at all and they're not doing any more SBA financing? We've already received responses from hundreds of franchisors who've indicated their preferences, but still there are many brands who are still digesting the addendum or consulting with their attorneys or are still unsure about the changes. The affiliation section is going to tell you whether the franchisor will sign either addendum, or if we've not reached them or they've not contacted us, it may say undetermined. And in that case, let us know. Send us an email, give us a call. We'll reach out to that brand right away and get a determination for you so you can process your deal. So just let us know if you have any issues there. Of course, you want the addendum signed as soon as possible, but the franchisor might not necessarily want to sign that addendum unless they're certain that the individual is a franchisee that they're going to have in their system with a signed agreement, or if they're an existing franchisee, are they in good standing with their system? So we've also added in the affiliation section the particulars of when the franchisor will sign the addendum, when in their process they're willing to do that. Now, not all franchisors are so particular that they have special processes when they're going to sign them. So some of them will just kind of come as you are and they'll sign whenever you want. But other brands have a process. Some brands will want to have training conducted before they sign their franchise agreement. A lot of different things. So if there is a variation with the brand, we will have that articulated for you right there in the affiliation section. I want to take a look briefly about why it's so important to determine the FTC stance and some issues that we've seen in the past, specifically with a brand called Window World, where the brand was operating without FTC classification, and a state actually found them to be a franchise and caused some major issues for some lenders and some brands. The definition of a franchise, the FTC definition, it's a three-part test, which is more restrictive than the previous two-part test which was applied. There's a lot of confusion on the issue, and we want to emphasize why it's so important to be sure whether a business meets the definition of a franchise according to the FTC. Window World is our example. And this is a company that was operating out of North Carolina, operated for many, many, many years as a license concept. And if you asked them to sign a document that said they're an FTC franchise and meet the FTC rule, they would have said no. This company had 200 licensees at the time when a state regulator disagreed. In 2012, Washington State said that they were in fact a franchise. They went along with a couple other states, issued a cease and desist order. The brand had to pay fines and rescind franchise agreements. A lot of issues there. So the question was, how would the SBA handle something like this? A small little institution, Carter Federal Credit Union, $230 million bank, lent one of their franchisees $1.25 million for Window World. And this bank had only done 8 SBA loans. It's a large potential risk for a small bank that doesn't do much SBA financing. So the question is, would the SBA hold the lender responsible and deny the guarantee if they didn't have a franchise affiliation addendum in their loan file in this case? Probably would deny the guarantee, so I'm thinking. Just one example, but there are many examples. Ace Hardware is another example. They're one that I get a lot. I get calls and emails about them. Sometimes they're a franchise, sometimes they're not. How do they handle true value? Many lenders have been asking what's going on with this. So that's just another example of where the FTC franchise designation can cause problems and why it's so important to pay attention to it. Another risk that you have involved with this process now is business eligibility. SBA has made decisions on brands regarding business eligibility in the past. And this is a considerable risk for loans without an affidavit, like, for example, Curves for Women, which is a franchise which were denied for eligibility, but later on the SBA created an eligibility note and an affidavit for potential borrowers. And basically this affidavit was an attest that the borrower had to say that their projected location for Curves had bathrooms and changing rooms that serviced both men and women. So they had separate bathrooms and changing rooms for men and women, such that they were not running afoul of the SBA's rules against gender discrimination. This is an example of another eligibility note or issue. And if there isn't additional documentation that's required to meet business eligibility guidelines in a case like this, then that document is going to be added onto the franchise registry for ease of access. So if you're thinking back to how you did things in the past with the registry, you might recall looking for an eligibility note, and that was where these issues would be hashed out. If the brand has business eligibility issues or had in the past, we're continuing to track those, and those affiliation or business eligibility documents, whether in the case of Curves it was an addendum that went with it, or an affidavit, that will all be on the franchise registry and continue to be there. So you'll be able to count on us for business eligibility as you have in the past. SBA did review business eligibility in the past. We talked about the salon suites issue, and this one gives us a little bit of whiplash when you look at it. The business eligibility issue was referred to the Office of Litigation. SBA did vet for eligibility, but what we're showing on the slides are the 3 emails from SBA that put the brands on the registry, took them off, and then put them back on. We have an email from 2010 taking them off. They were put back on the franchise registry 7 months later, and then they weren't approved again for 2014 when they asked us to remove those types of brands again from the franchise registry because it was determined it was a passive business. So a lot of back and forth from SBA on these issues. All right, taking it further into the SBA section. So we've looked at FTC franchise. We've looked at affiliation, whether or not they're willing to sign the document. We have looked at business eligibility issues. And finally, on the registry, we're going to have any other SBA requirements. So are there any other risks relative to the SBA? There are brands that have comfort letters, subordination agreements, lease agreements, and the like that have been deemed to not meet SBA requirements. For instance, the addendum does not address, in the case of Subway, there's an addendum that they have that does not address their lease agreements, in which they will not modify for SBA financing for the purchase of real estate unless the franchisee has 5+ locations. I'm not sure if any of you have done any subway loans, but they have an issue involving the purchase of real estate. You're only willing to waive that if the borrower has 5 or more locations. You're not going to know any of that unless you come on the franchise registry and look at other SBA requirements. If there are any other documents that have been modified to meet SBA requirements, then all of those documents will either be posted or we will explain why they do not meet SBA requirements. So that will all be there in the other section. And we know that you need assurances as lenders, and we stand behind this information by providing you access to all of the historical reviews. So at the very, very bottom of this SBA section, you're going to see what you're used to seeing when you would come to the SBA section in the past, where you're able to enter the 4-digit year of your agreement or choose from available years, and you're going to get the drop-down boxes that have the previously approved documents. All that stuff is still there. So if you need to access it for whatever reason, it's there. But the top sections that we saw in terms of whether we're going to sign the new addendum, all that stuff, that's what's current for the current SOP. So you don't have to go down into the old document section to pull any agreements, but it's there for your reference if you need it for any reason. And of course, we stand by that. We've been doing it for 20 years. All right, I want to pop back to this flow chart that we looked at before and just review again what you need to do to comply with the new SBA SOP. Best thing to do right off the bat is to identify the authorized agent at the franchisor organization. What's the best contact information? Again, get it from the franchise registry, get logged in, get to the home page. The best info is right there. Don't mess around with the borrower. It's just going to waste your time. Now, we want to answer the question, is it a franchise according to the FTC definition? Let's check that box. Let's make sure we're good. Get it from the franchise registry. Now, if it is a franchise, okay, now let's find out which addendum the franchisor is going to sign. Are they going to use the standard addendum, Form 2462? Okay. If they've determined that they want to use a previously approved addendum, you're going to need to execute that addendum, and you're also going to need to execute a new certification that is Form 2463. Those of you that have been doing SBA loans on the registry are familiar with this certificate and addendum model, right, where we get an addendum from the franchise registry and then we get a certificate of franchise documents. However, it's important to know that that certificate of franchise documents is different from this new certification. It's a separate form, it's not the old certificate, and it's only to be used in the case when the franchisee has elected to use their previously approved document. If the franchisor is signing the new standard addendum, Form 2462, that form does not require a certificate. So I know that it's kind of drilled in our brains to say, okay, we have an addendum and we have a certificate. In the new process, the new addendum, Form 2462, does not require a certificate. You're only going to need one when we're going to be using a previously approved addendum. And the certificate is just attesting that the addendum was approved previously and that there have been no changes between the language that was found acceptable for affiliation and the current language that's in the borrower's agreement. And then it's important to know that Form 2462 and 2463 are not used together, just to say it again. I know they're sequential. It seems like you might need them together. They're not used together. They're separate. And then the next thing you're going to need to look at, of course, is to determine business eligibility. That's available on the franchise registry, and if there are any other SBA requirements that are present in the deal like we discussed. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about your customized portfolio on the franchise registry, and this is really to make sure that you as a lender are informed as soon as possible about franchise brands that you regularly finance or have targeted to finance in 2017. So any changes that are happening, anything that's happening on the registry, you want to stay up to date on what you're looking at for your pipeline for this year for lending. So after this webinar, get on the franchise registry and put all these brands individually into your portfolio on the site. And that's really easy to do. Just search for a brand on the registry, and in the top right, you're going to see a button that says Plus Portfolio. Go ahead and do that. It's going to pop right in, and it's going to add it right into your portfolio. And after you do that, it's going to bring you back to your portfolio screen. And this is going to show you. So any changes to the information displaying on this page is going to trigger an email. So what does that mean? Any information. If there's a brand name or an Inc. name change, actually happens more than you think. That's going to trigger an alert. Changes in total franchise units, changes in fund score. if the new or updated bank credit report has been added to the site. So this is all great underwriting information that you want to keep up to date on. If a new franchise disclosure document has been updated, no more clicking on the registry every week in April to see if there's a new document. You're going to get an alert. That's good stuff. And finally, and most importantly for this call, changes in SBA documentation. So if they've decided now to use their old documents or want to use the standard addendum, we're going to tell you if there's a change in status. So there might be a couple brands on there that are unverified that we're going to find out what their stance is in the next couple weeks. You update for, you click that add to your portfolio for an update, we're going to let you know when we get that info in and get it changed. So that's good stuff as well. Okay, so notifications, you might be thinking, oh, wait a minute, I don't want to have an email every time the franchisor rolls over in bed. So what did we do? We added the ability for you to customize these notifications. So you'll see within your portfolio account in the top right, there is a tab that says notifications, and with that you can customize how often you'd like to be notified of these changes. Do you want them to be daily, weekly, monthly? You can modify that. For instance, there's a new brand called Flirty Girl Lash Studio who I actually talked to yesterday. They're getting their franchise disclosure document and information up on the registry. They just started franchising, and they've decided that they're able to sign the addendum. You'll be notified even though they're not in your portfolio if you have notifications for changes enabled on the notifications tab as well. And just as you've done regularly in the past, continue to send franchise brands to us that are not on the franchise registry or don't have their FBA tab up to date. We see new franchise brands all the time, 250 to 300 new brands every year. And it's super important that we get their information up there for you and for other lenders. This is, again, it's a community of interest site for you. The more you use the site, the more you're going to get out of it, the more lenders we have on these webinars. And using the registry and driving franchisors to put their information out there, you're going to have greater clarity and see-through in the franchise industry as a whole. And that's really what we're looking for, to make sure that you're getting the best information you can to make your lending decisions out there in the real world. So in other words, our site saves you time, it saves you money, and it can help you reduce your risk overall and with specific deals that you're working on. So it's in your best interest to make sure that we've got all the franchise brands on here. And if you find a new brand in the wild, send them on over to the registry and we'll get them straightened out and on here for you right away. Look a little bit deeper into some of the tools we have. In addition to the notifications, you will now be able to search for franchise brands who have agreed to the addendum and whose business model is eligible for financing. So in our advanced search, you're going to be able to say, hey, just weed out all these brands that aren't going to sign the addendum. I don't want to mess with them. You can do that. Other search criteria, such as success metrics and investment criteria, are available for use by our subscribers. There is a 4-pay subscription for lenders to access all this underwriting information and fund reports at the ready. Would definitely recommend looking into that. It's easy to tell what's free and what is paid for, though, on the site by the little lock. So if you're seeing something and it's grayed out, you're like, oh, what's going on? I don't have access. It's behind a lock. That is behind the pay subscription. And again, talk to us about that. We can get you all the great information and get you access. We are further expanding our advanced search feature for paid subscribers with franchisor financials, existence of multi-unit operators, the ability to search for franchisor headquarter locations, and the ability to flag a franchisor's account to let them know and say, hey, we're interested in financing your franchisees. And that type of information will actually pop up for brands when they log into the account. So there's a lender-facing franchise registry, but there's also a franchisor-facing site that brands log into to deal with lenders and get information like this, manage their brand through the registry. So there's a lot of value that's to be had in connecting with franchise brands as well. Quick update on the franchise unique identifying number, the FRUNS number. Now, you may have heard that SBA is now going off and creating their own numbering system, and that's essentially going to be a collage, kind of a hodgepodge of FRUNS numbers that existed, old SBA codes, new SBA codes that they're creating. And frankly, the coding system is still a bit of a mess. The big question we've had from lenders is, what's going on with FRUNS? We're saying, are we still going to have access to the FRUNS numbering system? And the answer, again, is of course. The FRUNS numbering system is still in place. Many of you lenders have been using the FRUNS to track financing inquiries by franchise and to also monitor the portfolio of your brands. And some of you subscribe to have the new brands and changes tracked on a monthly basis, which others just use the free information. There's a lot of lenders out there that use the FRUNS system. There's no worries. The FRUNS will still be available by brand on the franchise registry. The FRUNS is the backbone of our franchise database, and really the only way that you or anyone can organize and understand franchise brands accurately. The reason is because these brands just change their names so often that it can be hard to track a loan that's in your portfolio over the course of your loan, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it's going to be. Some of the changes in these brand names are simple. There's an example out there, Quaker Steak and Lube Franchising, change their name to QSL, right? Quaker Steak and Lube, QSL. Seemed like a simple one. But there are other brands that just completely rip up the name and change it completely. A brand called Sitters, etc. changes to SEI Healthcare. A brand called Look Good Naked became TrueMe. An assisted living facility called The Haven is now called Avondale. You know, without the FRUNS numbering system to track this, you're not going to be able to maintain consistency and say, oh, wait a minute. The Haven, and they're the same thing. I've got 3 loans to The Haven, and they all failed. Why am I going to loan to Avondale now? I've never heard of them. So great way to have the FRUNS number used in your portfolio. Make sure that you're tracking loans. Brands have different lender risk characteristics when they make these changes. Sometimes they change their brand entirely. They're changing into a different type of franchise, and they're going to require separate affiliation determinations as well. And amplify that even further when you take into account that there's greater identification challenges when there are typically 6,000 or so cases of franchisors changing their names or their Inc. name within the past few years. So we can point to over 6,000 individual cases of these modifications. Again, some of them are innocuous, just shortenings, but some of them are completely out of left field, and it's important for lenders to understand who we're dealing with when we're lending to a specific brand. All right, we're throwing another poll up on the screen for everyone to look at. So given the new requirements, where are you most concerned regarding your guarantee? Are you concerned about identifying the brands of franchise, franchisors who need additional documentation, self-reviewing to resolve issues, all or none of the above? If you're none of the above, you're an all-star. Seeing these start to come in here, I'm going to say self-reviewing because I've got a lot of issues and I need to do some self-reviewing to solve them. So you can see the results. Most of them are either in self-reviewing or all of the above, which makes sense. You know, if you're used to the SBA covering all these other issues and now they're leaving and shifting some risk onto you, you know, having to review these on your own can be a daunting challenge. All of the above coming in at 40%. Here's some of the results that we've had from previous webinars, and we've kind of aggregated these. They're color-coded by session. Pretty much solid across the board, and in terms of all of the above and the uncertainty. And what this kind of illustrates is it hasn't really gotten better over the weeks have gone. SBA hasn't really calmed anything down. We've gotten new rules and new changes and new procedural notices. So I guess the point is that there's a lot of uncertainty, but we're here with the information, and we're going to be collecting return information from franchisors, seeing how the industry is playing out, and we're always going to be returning that information to you to improve your process and improving the registry. So we're all in this together. I want to take a bit of a look at coming soon on the franchise registry. And because we're the franchise subject matter experts, you guys are constantly asking us questions to help you improve as lenders, but also to help us improve our processes in assessing and helping lenders and financing franchisees. So we want to share with you a few items that are coming soon that will help you improve your ability to assess credit risk on the franchise registry. One that I'm really super excited about actually is the unit geography tab, which you see we're on that now and is a child of the general tab. So we were on that general tab on the franchise registry before. We went over to SBA, which was on the far right. Unit geography is right in the middle, and it's really great. This is going to give us access to state-by-state success rates. And this is for subscribers. So this is another great reason why you want to look at a subscription on the franchise registry for a lender. But one of the biggest questions that we receive from lenders, aside from the general kind of is this franchise good or not, is how does this franchise perform in a specific state, right? How's this performing in my region? A lot of times lenders are regional lenders or they have a certain geographical area. The unit geography tab now is going to be enhanced so that you're going to be able to see state-by-state success rates, and as well, the map under the unit geography is going to show the number of franchise locations that a brand has by state. So you simply hover your mouse over the state to see additional information. It's going to show you the 5-year continuity rate for the brand in the state and the number of franchisees. So in the example we're showing, you can see that Dunkin' Donuts had a 92.86% continuity rate. So what that means is that there's nearly a 93% success rate for Dunkin' Donuts, and in the past 5 years, they opened 41 locations, but they only closed 4 locations. So that's what you can get from success rate and continuity rate. And this is being launched this week for Franchise Registry subscribers. So if you're already a subscriber, it's going to show up this week. If you're not, get in and let us know. We can talk about how to get you guys up to date with the best information. Another great addition that we're adding are ratings of a franchise brand. This is actually going to be an anonymous rating system too, so you don't have to worry about any issues there. A couple years ago at Lender Conference, the lenders, we asked you if you would value the ability to rate franchise brand, and there was actually an overwhelming response out there, thinking that there's a wealth of knowledge out there in the lender community, but an individual in a pocket of lending in one side of the country may not be privy to it because information exchanges happen through individual conversations between lenders, or maybe you met another lender at a conference, something like that, but there's not this real open exchange of pitfalls and possibilities with lending. What have we done? What are the best practices that maybe we can learn from? So now with this new option, you're going to be able to learn from your peers in lending based on rating systems. We'll have the opportunity, of course, to rate a franchise brand and do it anonymously. And we can also talk about our experience with the franchise brand, right? How responsive was the franchisor during the financing process? Or if the loan defaulted, were they helpful on the back end? Were we able to get something out of them? Or when the loan defaulted, they say, hey, forget about it, I don't want to hear from you. We've heard both positive and negative feedback from lenders. We've had lenders that have had to sue franchisors. Lenders have worked with franchisors to have them buy a failed location. So there's experiences on both ends, and this is super critical information. And again, this goes to the free part of the site, is that community of interest site for lenders. So the more you use it, the more feedback we get, the more we can aggregate best practices, educate other lenders, and also educate franchisors on best practices in the industry. And again on this, the franchisor will never see your bank name or your name at all. This is just to aggregate best practices and try to make franchisor behavior a little bit better, a little bit more conducive to what you're looking for in terms of a lender. All right, I wanted to wrap up just by looking at some FAQs, and then we can turn to some questions that maybe you all have sent or maybe that are coming up as we come in for a landing here. The most frequently asked question prior to the February notice was, do you think this is the final version of the SOP, or are we going to see additional changes? At the time before, we predicted that there would be additional changes because we were seeing some vehement opposition to the standard form addendum by some large franchisors that were making a lot of noise. Now, of course, we've seen the changes. So the question now is since the grandfathering of old negotiated addendums is temporary, again, 2015, 2016 addendums, this is a temporary notice, is this issue going to become permanent? Or what are we going to see now? What are we going to see with new gyrations of SBA rules going forward? The answer, of course, for now is it's anyone's guess. We're here keeping an eye on it. We're going to inform you. We're going to have the best information available on the registry, and these webinars will continue in the future. We're going to be paying attention to any of these changes that are coming up. So another question here is, what will FRAN data continue to do for lenders and franchisors? Well, we're going to continue to be here and do what we have been doing. We have all the business eligibility decisions that have been made by SBA over the past 20 years. We have that in our inventory. No one else has that. That's a record of all the eligibility decisions they have made for 20 years. We're going to help franchisors efficiently determine whether their business model or documentation create lender issues, and we're going to address them so that lenders can rely on the SBA guarantee. And to wrap up, where does the franchise registry fit into this new process? Well, we're going to be where we always were, right there in the middle of it. Lenders, you're going to go to the franchise registry now to determine whether the franchisor will sign the new addendum or if they have conditions. Next, check the franchise registry to see whether the brand has any affiliation or credit issues related to business or other eligibility documentation requirements. And finally, determine whether the brand is credit worthy. That's could be almost more important, using bank credit reports on the registry, fund reports on the franchise registry, available franchise disclosure documents, everything that you have. You don't need to figure out this information on your own. We have it available for you. It's on the franchise registry. I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. And now you know why the franchise registry is not going away. You have uncertainties, you have risks, but the franchise registry has the solutions, and we will continue to have them for you. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation today. We do have some questions on the side, so I'm going to take a look at those. If you have any other ones, go ahead and type them in. Okay, question from Tim. How do we handle franchise deals where the franchisor is not listed on the registry? Previously, we would send the pertinent docs to SBA Legal for review, but now? Well, the first thing I would say is if the franchisor is not listed on the franchise registry, give us a call as soon as you can so we can list them on the franchise registry. We want to make sure that they are educated in the process, and then we can help them make a determination on whether or not they're going to sign the new addendum. The process of sending documents to SBA for legal review has been eliminated. If you are familiar with sending documents into an inbox at SBA called Delegated Franchise Review, that inbox has been closed. They are no longer receiving emails, and the affiliation review is not required. They're applying a standard addendum. But it's super important to get them on the site and get them available, get their FTD online, get them a FRUNS number, and their determination of what they're going to sign. Now, if the brand hasn't had a previously approved addendum from 2015 or 2016, if it's a new concept or the brand hadn't been approved in the past, then they're going to be restricted to just that standard addendum form 2462. They're not going to have that option, and there is no further review process for new addendums to be created at this time. So that is not a part of SBA policy anymore. All right. Final poll is on the screen. I'm going to vote good. I'm going to go modest today. We're going to say good. All right. Thank you again for attending the presentation. Here's some contact information for our president, Edith Wiseman. If you want to reach out, my information is also available. The direct line for our main line here at Fran Data is 703-740-4700. My contact information is available if you have any specific issues or any questions, or maybe there's a deal that you're working on that you don't want to post in the general chat. I'd be happy to help.